join me in welcoming our panelist speakers and moderator to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Hope you've had a great conversation so far. And now, to carry on the conversation further, we will be mapping the landscape of the Malaysian digital economy, where, as the MC said, we will be exploring matters like what are the current sectors in Malaysia, the strategies, the challenges, and I hear that talent is a major challenge, and also where do we go from here as a nation, as a sector, and also individuals. And to assist us with this, we have three brilliant experts in the field. In order of the program, I will first introduce Dr. Rachel Gong. So Rachel is a Deputy Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute. Her ongoing research focuses on digital policy, including digital inclusion, the digital economy, and digital governance. We also have Mr. Raja Seguren. He is currently the Director of Strategy, Research and Insights in Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, or MDEC, an agency tasked by the government to develop and lead the country's digital economy. He has led the development of various national macro strategies and roadmaps for the country's digital economy and sits in several national level platforms, committees, and task forces to help the country to shape strategies and policies to deliver impactful outcomes. And last but not least, we have Mr. Raymond Davadas. He's the founder and managing director of Day 3 Digital Berhad. He specializes in providing strategic management direction, particularly in the field of digital transformation, strategy, and management. So with this introduction, let's start. But before that, I will ask the panelists some questions, but I understand that there's a lot of questions from the floor as well, so please keep them coming. We would really like to address them. And there will also be 3 polls. Do actively participate in it. It will definitely let us know whether you're actually paying attention. Okay, so Raja, can I start with you? To provide context, how would you define the digital economy in Malaysia?
Thank you, Shamila. I think that's a very good question. I can always say you can refer back to the DE blueprint and you'll find the definition there, but that's going to be very academic, right? This is not a 20-second answer. It takes a bit while. But just to give a context of this, digital economy is basically an economy with a digital lens. Okay? So now what is this? So in all economies, you must have supply-demand enabler. And where does digital come in? Providing that value add for each of these 3 components and how is it measured, that is what digital economy is. In short, there is no global definition available today. Every organization, global think tanks, countries have their own way of defining digital economy. Just to give some perspective, in the world, there are 2 broad categories of how they kind of coin or define this term. One looks at e-commerce, commerce, and the components, transaction, trade, payment, etc. And then they call it digital economy. The other one talks about macro economy of a country and what's the contribution of digital to the economy. So I'm a follower of the second one because e-commerce alone, commerce alone cannot represent the entire economy. Yeah, it has to be a holistic form of the entire economy. So in Malaysia, Department of Statistics measures on a yearly basis over the last 10 years the contribution of ICT to the economy. So that's our digital economy kind of measurement. And I've not seen anywhere in the world a country that has been so consistently measuring the contribution to the economy. Why do we need this? What measures gets done? If you don't measure, you do not know where you are heading. So that is what we have. I'm sure Mr. Kabi just now in his welcome remarks has thrown in so many data, so many numbers, etc. with my colleague, Mr. Wan Mudani as well. But just to give you a perspective, if you are a holding company, you have subsidiaries, right? You roll up the revenue or profits of the subsidiaries to make up your holding company's revenue or profit. That is what the digital economy is. The economy is your holding company, and your digital economy is a subset of the economy. So today, the latest data that we have as of 2022, released by the Department of Statistics, we are at 23% of the GDP, right? So I'll pause here.
Okay, so thank you very much. But maybe you can also provide us an idea of what are the key current sectors of the digital economy in Malaysia?
Department of Stats look into 5 big components: ICT manufacturing, ICT services, ICT trade, ICT content in media, and e-commerce. These are the 5 components that Malaysia looks at. So for now, e-commerce has been the biggest contributor to the digital economy. About 40% of the digital economy comes from e-commerce. That's how big it is. It's followed by ICT services. And services, when you look at that, largely contributed by telcos. So there are a lot of data here. And just to share, I purposely brought this. If you want to know a lot more about digital economy, you must download this in our website under MDEC publication link. You can have this called Horizon. The last part of this has a lot of data about digital economy and how we have analyzed. This part of my research team's work. So fully packed with data and also thought leadership from internal and external contributors. So that's a very good start if you want to know where the focus areas.
Thanks. So, Rachel, so far we've heard of really major sectors like e-commerce, AI, but you have a very specific research that you actually concentrate on, and that's health and governance, AI governance. So, why specifically focus on health in particular?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Shamila, and thank you to MIM for the invitation to be here today. So if I might start by just very quickly kind of recapping what work the Khazanah Research Institute does, that gives us some insight to why we are looking at the things we are looking at. So KRI is a policy research institute. It's a non-profit organization, and our research mandate is to look at pressing issues of the nation and provide evidence-based policy recommendations to interested stakeholders, which range from government agencies and decision makers to private sector and to the public at large. So the focus for the team I lead, which is working on digital policy, complements the work that MDEC is doing by looking at digital inclusion and digital governance. So we want to see the digital transformation of the country be beneficial to as wide a group of people as possible. So while we like to see industry kind of run ahead and do innovation and R&D and push forward, we want to make sure there's a supporting ecosystem that will bring up everyone else as well. So in looking at healthcare, that's one of the reasons that we've looked into digital health and the growth opportunities there. And one of our key focus, even before we started looking at digital health, was looking at data governance. Because you really don't have, as Raja was just saying, you need all this data, you need data analysis to really push ahead. You need informed decision making. And a lot of the decisions that we are kind of used to making rely on relatively limited data. So one of the things that Kiara is pushing for is to open up more data. There's a national data sharing policy that's being developed and is being rolled out. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects things as well. And we try to balance all of this, the open use of data, with safeguards that need to be taken for people's privacy. We want to make sure that efforts of R&D and private sector are valued and respected in that way so that it's not completely open, but there are certain things that need to be shared so that the whole economy can grow. So back to your question, why data governance and why healthcare? Those are exactly the reasons to try and push everything forward to build as wide a base of users and beneficiaries as possible that will also give opportunity to other sectors to come in and play and develop.
And how has this been so far for you? How has how receptive has your research been, especially amongst policymakers as well as industry practitioners? And we'll come to you in a bit, Raymond.
I would like to say it's been relatively well received. Of course, we can always do better. I think, for example, on the point of open data, this is work that we started in 2020, 2021, and we were then working with Mampu, which had a mandate to put out open data. But at that time, I think a lot of people who work with government agencies may be familiar with this. A lot of the information is usually classified as confidential or secret. So it's hard to get public data out. Recent changes in DOSM have seen, a lot of data now made open to people, for the public to look at, for researchers to look at, for companies to try and analyze and see where they can find areas of growth, areas of opportunity in the market. So I think in that sense, we've moved forward a little bit. And of course, a lot of it is really just trends that are happening in the world at large with respect to understanding the need for this data. And so now going beyond public data towards private data as well, I think is where we hope to see more improvements in terms of data sharing. So the response to that has been good. The response also from MOH with respect to digital health, there's a very, how shall I say this? Digital health has actually been in the works in Malaysia for a very long time. This is not something that's actually new. The Ministry of Health has had their telemedicine blueprint in place since 1997. Right? But challenges of the different types of technology, the different types of infrastructure have kind of held us back a little bit. And now with the growth of all these changes happening, we're seeing, renewed motivation, renewed determination to move these things forward. So we're hopeful that a lot of these things that we're proposing will actually see implementation, things like interoperability, for example.
Thank you. So that's really high level. We've gone from the national policymaker to a research institute. So let's hear on what's actually happening on the ground. I understand that you are in customer management experience. I have had many experiences working, trying to get through a human because I have to go through a bot first. I'm not sure your experience with that, but I would love to hear your perspective on that, and what exactly is Digital Tree doing, and maybe you can also provide us some examples of your work.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So just maybe to put things into context and give you a sort of a view of what we do. So we call ourselves a global business company, global business services company, GBS company, and digital GBS company. That may seem a little bit of a mouthful. But maybe if I can take you back a little bit in time, we used to call this business process outsourcing, and today it's known as GBS. And I'll explain a little bit later why those terms have changed. But if you go back, I remember from the days when I was in school, and I think we had this conversation earlier, when you talk about outsourcing, the first thing you think about is a call center. You think about somebody sitting behind a cubicle answering your calls. The first thing you told me just now was you're trying to get hold of someone, service provider, to speak to someone. I think my first memory of that was, I think if those of you are in my age category would still remember the number 7552525. How many of you remember that? I'm sure most of you can resonate with that. If you wanted a pizza, that's the number that you would call, right? And that was the thought of having a call center, right? But that was in the 90s. Things have changed, things have evolved. Today, if you want to reach out to your service provider, it's not just by way of trying to call someone. The internet changed things. You were able to then reach out to your service provider, not just by way of a call, but also through an email, right? And then in the early 2000s, when the mobile world and revolution came about, you will be able to, forgive me for using this word, but if you want to bitch about your service provider, you could even go to the social media, right? That's what we do when we're angry. We go to the social media and we say all sorts of things and hashtag everything, right? But imagine if you're a service provider today, you have your voice of your customer coming through a phone call, coming through an email, maybe coming even through social media. And this makes it very, very difficult for people to manage, but the amount of data. But that's typically what you think a contact center would do in a customer experience world. But today, we are not talking about contact center anymore. We're talking about intelligent solution center with the advent of AI. Imagine if I tell you today what your thought of a contact center was perhaps somebody receiving a call. But let me tell you today things that what a contact center would do. For example, that we also do work in the area of trust and safety. Right? If you were if you were going to put something up on TikTok, for example, there's a group of people who are moderating that content. There's a group of people who are sitting and sieving through those contents to make sure that it's safe. It's safe for the children. It's safe for the society. So we do content moderation work in the area of trust and safety. What if I tell you that contact centers also do data annotation, meaning that we are labeling pictures and images that is coming out onto the web. If you see a seat and you see with 4 stools, you tag it that this is a chair. You see it with a lower stool with leather, you say this is a sofa, this is not the chair. And contact centers are doing all these works because of the proliferation of data and how the world has changed. So today, when we talk about outsourcing, the first thing people think about is cost. I would outsource to cost because of cost factors. I would go to Malaysia because labor is cheap. I would go to Indonesia because labor is cheap. But that is not the case anymore. And I alluded earlier that we've moved away from outsourcing to what is known now as global business services. Because centers like us today are some of the few industries that are really adopting the new technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's large language models or even GPTs. And service providers are beginning to look for outsource providers not because of cost, but because of value, because they want to access technology. Organizations that feel that they don't have the expertise reach out and outsource, not just because they want to keep their costs low, but to reach out to the service providers able to provide them the kind of technology that they need, access to technology, access to new technologies. So that's what we do for a living as in a global business services space today, where the world has, the whole industry has evolved from what it was from the 1990s to where we are today.
Okay, thanks very much, Raymond, for the elaborate answer. And this leads me to you, Raja. We've heard so much buzzwords, right? AI, fake, what do you call that? Not fakeness, yeah, fakeness, but I think whether or not what we see on social media or on the web is correct. You have the dark web and all that. So all of that, especially if everyone's going to start going into the digital economy, everyone's going to have an online profile, what would be that strategy to move forward? And also address to you, Rachel, in terms of some of the key sectors that we are looking at, and how would you suggest that the online profiles and the online data that all of us as individuals are putting online be protected as we move forward with this digital economy? What are the key sectors, and what would be the sectors that would need to be protected as well?
Yeah, I can start first. With the explosion of data comes in with the huge cost of protecting the data. I think that's very key. Today in your offices, you have a lot of P&C data, a lot of customer-related data that you got to really protect it. So the more data you have, the more prone that you can be attacked, because there's value behind this data. So what do we need to do to protect them? Cybersecurity was just gazetted this year, a few months ago. So that's one of the policy that government has put in place. So the personal data protection is now being reviewed. So that's another area. So when I say all these things being gazetted and reviewed, this is really going into the nuts and bolts of things. Policy is high level, but when it comes to impact, it's extremely detailed, extremely painful for a lot of organizations. So there's a lot of engagements happen with stakeholders, private sectors, companies, data centers, cybersecurity companies along the way. And this is an ongoing battle. There's no end to this. As we get more sophisticated with AI, as Shamila has mentioned, the AI is also in the hands of people who may do harm at the same time. So everybody is trying to up their game against each other. So it's a race that we got to look into. So from a national point of view, there's a National Cybersecurity Agency, NACSA, that was formed a few years ago. So under Arahan 8, that's a cybersecurity element under them, and they are also looking into this very seriously. There's a monitoring system that they have, and we work together with them on some of these areas. So we used to run programs, CIO programs on cybersecurity. How do we elevate the knowledge, etc. The other one is breach of data. Some companies don't disclose of the breach. Yeah. So how do we motivate companies to disclose? Why do we want to disclose this information? So that other companies can take heed, right? And also protect their systems. So those are the things I think at policy levels happening.
Yeah, Rachel, before you start, can someone flash out the poll results? I think it would be quite interesting for us to take a look. Yeah. So I think, yeah, so the biggest challenge in terms of digital health record, and I would think based on other parts of the digital economy as well, is keeping data private and secure. So, sorry, just wanted to hear your insights on this as well.
Yeah, thanks. I would echo everything Raja has just said about, data governance and cybersecurity. So maybe I'll try to pivot from answering at that macro level towards a meso level at the organizational level, kind of what can be done. And I think this point on sort of talent development is really key. It's not just about building the technical skills that are necessary. Sure, there's something we've always talked about, which is improving digital literacy so that people know what the risks are, so that they know how to manage things. But even at an organizational level, I think that there needs to be a little shift in attitude towards how technology is used. A little bit of embracing certain things, embracing new technologies, embracing a reliance on data for decision making as opposed to experience, which I think is the tendency of most leaders, which is, I've done this before, I know what it is, and the data may say something different, and we should take, I think, advantage of having that data to analyze and look at how shifts are happening and what new opportunities can be taken, both in terms of dealing with threats and recognizing, okay, maybe at a macro level, we say the biggest threat is X, it's keeping data private and secure. I don't deny that. But maybe at that particular organizational level, the biggest problem is actually making sure records are standardized, because the records aren't useful if they're not standardized. So looking at the data, finding decisions, doing analysis so that decisions can be made on the strength of those evidence, I think is one way that organizations as well can move forward on top of the sort of macro level policies that are being developed.
So Raymond, here's a question for you. On the back of worries of keeping individual data private and secure, and all the information that is given to bots as they analyze data, where would you see the next generation of trends in the digital economy would be in terms of sectors on the back of this worry, and what can be done? And Raja, if you can pitch in after that as well.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting if we had turned that question a little bit and say that instead of digital health to financial records. And I would want to see what would the reaction be. Because for the longest time, we have all had our financial numbers with financial institutions. I wonder whether that same answer would still come out from the general poll to say that we are fearful of data that is kept with the financial institutions. But I think we have, over a period of time, come to believe and trust that our financial data is safe and secure. And I think as we move to new industries, we begin to get this fear again. So with technology, there's always an element of balancing. And this is what I've learned, this balancing this level of nervousness versus the level of excitement. We are always excited of these new technologies. We see this AI coming in, we see bots coming in to do work. You spoke earlier about you having to reach out to your service provider and, instead of speaking to a bot, you rather want to speak to a person. And you alluded to that. But there's always this sense of nervousness, as excitement, yes, I want to do it, but also the nervousness that can it be done in the right way, in the right form? How do you keep it in a controlled environment? So I think, data privacy is absolutely crucial, absolutely important. And as we begin to look at, I think Wan Mudani also spoke earlier about the ethical concerns as well with regards to the data boom that we have today. So I think that's something that we are grappling with the rest of the world, but I think it's very crucial that this is not, I think something is very important, that this is not just specific to health, it's going to cut across every single industry because there is a data boom everywhere. All our information is being shared in with multiple sources and in various ways and forms, you know. So I feel that there is this element of nervousness that we will definitely have to go past, as we have done in the past. But obviously, the ecosystem needs to support the agenda. You know, I think this is where the policymakers come in to make sure that we keep this not just data, but also a lot of other private information secure.
Sorry, could I jump in very quickly before Raja comes in? Because I think, Raymond, you raised a really good point about the financial data versus the health data. And this is an interesting comparison that we looked at a little bit, where financial data is very, very tightly regulated. So you have a little bit of confidence, right, because the data is being governed so well, so thoroughly. Whereas health data, what our research shows is there isn't actually a health data specific regulation, right? So obviously, I think this is why there's trust issues, there's concerns about that, and that's one of the things that you know should move forward. So I think what I would say then broadly, sometimes I feel that there's industry concern about over-regulating. But what we can see in this discussion is that actually some regulations are good. They build trust, they help people be confident of what we're doing with the work, and we can move forward that way.
All right, thanks, Rachel. So let's understand from Raja, how do we move forward in new industries, in current industries, on the back of this nervousness? I would like to hear more about e-commerce, that is 40% of our digital economy. Also, we've heard about health, now we've heard about finance. What other sectors, is the government trying to push in the nation at the moment?
Good question. I think first of all, we got to understand what are the sectors in Malaysia. Yeah, let's define that boundary first. So whatever we touch, we say a sector. That's our casual conversation that we have on the street or in the office. Oh, this is a sector, that's a sector. You know, medical equipment is a sector, etc. But at macro level, that's not how government sees this. There are only 5 economic sectors: manufacturing, agriculture, services, construction, and mining. These are the 5 economic sectors. Now, healthcare, tourism, etc., comes under services. If you double-click services, you get 10 drop down. So that's what it means, right? So now, where do you focus? If you double-click manufacturing, it goes down another 20 feet down, you know, or 20 levels down, right? So every area of sector has so many subsectors and sub-subsectors. Now, where do we focus and put our bets and say that this will work in the next 5-10 years, right? Our colleague, Mr. Yong from SIDEC, has also have said manufacturing is very key, because that's the value chain of work. That's the upstream of the entire tech ecosystem. The infrastructure, if you peel the infrastructure, you go up to the semiconductor level. Without that, nothing works in the midstream and the downstream. We consumers work on the downstream side. So these are the perspectives or lenses that we got to put in to say, where do we focus? You see, we don't say, oh, agriculture, then everybody run towards agriculture. So hang on, is it where in agriculture are we looking at, right? So what we did about 3 years ago, and we are revising this again as we speak, yeah? So 3 years ago, we did a global research by the strategy team together with a few people in MDEC. And then we sieved down to Malaysia's plans. What are the national plans? Then we looked at where MDEC is looking at, right? And what's future like? Based on all these things, we came up with 9 areas, not sectors, but 9 areas. Islamic digital economy, healthcare, tourism, cities, and so on and so forth. I can give you the list later, but there are 9 areas. And 9 areas supported by 10 tech enablers: AI, IoT, embedded ICT, and so on and so forth. And we have blockchain and all. So they have 10. So it's 9 by 10. So even this 9 by 10, the convergence of these are so strong you can't just decouple them and say, I want to focus in this today, right? If you took an application today in the organization today at enterprise level, you don't buy a mid-office application or a front office application. You buy one application that actually can talk to all of these things, all your functional areas, right? So for us to put a bet on where we want to focus becomes even harder, right? So we struggle on a month-to-month, year-to-year basis. Say, where do we look at? So now, this is a very good question. So from a government point of view, government plans every 5 years. So you know the Malaysia 5-year plans, right? Rancangan Malaysia ke-12, ke-11 and so on. So we are the cusp of Rancangan Malaysia ke-12 and Rancangan Malaysia ke-13, yeah? The 12th and the 13th plan. So next year is the end of 12th plan, and the following year is the beginning of the 13th plan, 2026 to 2030. So from a digital economy point of view, where do we focus? So we looked at three different areas, or I would say three boxes, for example. One is a macro landscape of few things. Economy, social, and tech landscape. That's the first box. Second box is about competition. Who are we competing against with? The countries that we are competing with. The region, outside the region, Asia-Pac, what are they doing towards 2030? So that needs to be understood. Third one is, what are our core competencies? Malaysia's core competencies. For example, manufacturing. And where in manufacturing? Agriculture, where in agriculture? Services, where in agriculture? Where in services? So where are our core competencies? You combine these three areas, then you make a story about this is our direction for 2026 to 2030. So we are seeing trends across the globe in terms of urbanization. 6 years ago, Malaysia's urbanization was high at 74%. Today, we are at 79%. And you can see, as you drive down city and some places in KL, the mushroomings of apartments and condominiums, it's crazy, right? So where are these people coming from? All from outskirts. They are just jamming up the city. So imagine the problems and opportunities in the city itself. So we have a digital city element as a focus area. So how do we bring about change, and how do we impact at every layer, from individual, industry, sectors, firm, and also government? So that's the way that we are thinking in MDEC today. Just to answer just one part of the equation, but there's a lot more story. I think that'll take more time.
Yeah, I think let's hear from the industry practitioner. Yeah, right? I mean, that's a brilliant policy and plan. So what's the real situation on the ground, number one? And there's a very interesting question here to say that before we look at the big picture, maybe, we need to improve our telco services. And on that point, there's another question as well, whether telco should be one of the protected sectors within the digital economy.
You may want to take the question on the industry. But I think the real challenge we have on the ground, and also one of the speakers alluded earlier, is also that, talent is always an issue. I think it's not just an issue in Malaysia, it's a global issue that we are facing. What makes it worse is today that with the proliferation of all these new technologies, your learnings, almost become irrelevant when you graduate. And then what happens to employability? By the time you come into work, I was at a recent session recently, and we were talking about this, that how universities now need to begin to look at problem-based learning. We spoke about use cases, the lack of use cases. AI is developing AI tools. It's all about developing use cases for problems. But we get graduates who come in who are not able to do that. We get graduates who are not able to think critically. Problem-based learning becomes more important than just pure text-based learning. So these are things that we should be looking at, even at a grassroots level, at education level, because the kind of people, the skills that we will need when we hire into our industries will be very, very different. Because today we are hiring people. In my organization, for example, we have one of the largest bot farms. A lot of back office work, a lot of fulfillment work, a lot of work that required you to memorize workflows. You don't need that anymore. You could program the bot to do it. If you'd call into our center and say, look, I have a problem that I have a problem with my billing. I need a copy of my billing. In the past, a human person would do it. Today, you just have to put a drop-down menu and click and say, so-and-so needs his billing for the next 6 months. And then that's it. He just has to say that. What happens behind the scenes, he doesn't know, because the bot has taken over to do everything else to make sure that that fulfillment is done. So you need to begin to work with intelligent bots. You need to be able to program these bots. And a lot of these bots today you don't even need programming knowledge. There's low-code bots, there's no-code bots. So the thinking, it becomes more important. The EQ becomes more important than the hard skills. So how do we look at that in terms of producing talent? That becomes a big issue today for us.
Thanks, Raymond. So yes, Raja, I think many of these questions would be addressed to you. We seem to have a solid plan, right? And in every plan, the devil is always in the details. So we've heard from the audience about the need to improve our telecommunication services. We've heard from Raymond, and I believe just now as well, about the need for talent, and Mr. Yong mentioned that too, about the need of talent. So as MDEC, lead the national planning for the digital economy, how does it collaborate with all the different stakeholders to understand what's happening on the ground to allow for a cohesive and comprehensive moving forward for the nation?
That's I got a long answer, but I'll try the short one. Right? We have several agencies, ministries in the country. Today, 25 years ago, ICT is only spoken by only a select group or groups. Today, digital is so pervasive, it cuts across everybody, every agency, every ministry. So we play a role where when we build our national plans, national roadmaps, maybe I give you an example. We are just finishing a national MSME digitalization roadmap 2030. We are finishing that. Right? We have done our economics calculation, etc. Where will the uplift be? Where will the economy be because of MSME? All done. But in doing this, we roped in more than 20 over ministries and agencies, part of the whole study group. Right? So that we have a one vision, one target, several strategies as a country to push this forward with collaboration with all these agencies with one governance. So that's how government works. That's how policy works. Right? And if we want to drive this in a way that we want to do this alone, it will never work, because the languages are different in one ministry to another ministry and one agency to another agency. This is federal. You not even move to state, and also at district level, right? So this whole conversation can be the same with different languages. How do you build this? So it's a very energy-sapping work. So in that one roadmap alone, I will go out to meet the stakeholders at least 3 or 4 days in a week, right? Because you've got to bring everybody together to understand that. So that's how we get cohesiveness. For example, case in point, way back in 2015 and 2016, I was leading the National E-Commerce Roadmap Plan. Today, there's a good governance led by both MDEC and MITI, and we are seeing the benefits out of e-commerce. And we track all the outcomes and KPIs, and agencies review their work and efforts on a quarterly basis, and numbers are revised. At country level, more than 30 over ministries and agencies. So that's a good working model. That can be replicated. So that's how we see things.
Okay, thanks. And Rachel, since we're still on the topic of opportunities and challenges, how about data governance? And I want to address this specific question to you, where someone from the audience asked, is digital ID for each and every Malaysian a good idea? Padu was very much a doubtful database with a lot of hiccups. So based on your experience with data governance, what would be your feedback on this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think first let me try to break up the concepts because those are two really different things, right? So digital ID, in a sense, is really something to verify your identity so that you can do transactions or receive services or things like that. In some sense, we have an ID in our MyCard. A digital ID simply makes that something that works, that is trusted online, right? So that's one aspect of it. And in my personal opinion, I think that's a good thing because that streamlines a lot of processes. So right now, for example, you want to pay your parking, right? You download one app, you register. Then you go to a different state. Chances are you download another app, you register. Then you want to go to a hospital, you register there. Technically, it's the same information, you are the same person, but you have to do it differently and it's all kept in different databases. Having one national digital ID will streamline that. I'm not discounting the cybersecurity concerns. I'm not discounting the privacy, the data privacy and protection concerns. But as a process, this is exactly, I think, what we want to see in terms of digital transformation. PADU, on the other hand, is a database of citizen information. And that is required for a different reason. From a policy-making perspective, it's very important to have all different types of data about people, people's behavior, localities, so that we know things like, where do I build a new school? Do I need to improve roads here? Have we maxed out how many houses are in this area? Do we need a commercial zone and all that sort of thing? So that information has to be collected somewhere. And as part of the challenges of kind of bringing all of these together in a centralized or a federated way, because of existing infrastructure, a lot of our data is held by different government agencies in different places. It's very hard to link them all together. So PADU was an effort to try to do that. Okay, so my opinion, was it implemented in the best possible way? No. Because what, in my opinion, should have happened is the government agencies at the back end should have tried to link up those databases that already exist. Whereas what happened was PADU said, we will now try to recollect all this information from individuals by making them put in the data all over again and then verify that against, government agencies. So the implementation, the idea, the principle, I think was the right idea to improve policy making, but the implementation was not the greatest. And of course, what happened then is that the public looked at it and went, why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. Why are we doing like that? I don't trust this. Cybersecurity concerns. And so what was intended as a good idea wound up not getting enough buy-in to really be useful. So two separate things, both of which I think need to progress in appropriate ways. But as Shamila has mentioned, the devil really is in the details, and a lot of the details are in implementation and how we roll it out.
Okay, and I think this ties in with the need for collaboration that Raja mentioned. And can I have the next poll question? Because this relates to you, Raymond. You highlighted the issue of skills, right? And I want to throw this to industry as opposed to national level agencies, right? There's a lot of feedback that we do not have enough skills. We need to build our talent pool. The government has got a plan, but what is industry's plan with this? I mean, you are on the ground. So what are you would know what kind of skills you require in your area. So what would you do to contribute towards talent development in Malaysia?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to make sure that this number is correct, 100%. I don't know whether one person answered the question or everybody's in sync, but I think this is what we do with the industry. I think it's very important for us to work with industry associations. I work very closely with a couple of associations in my industry, and in that capacity, I've had the privilege of working very closely with MDEC to develop the industry skills framework. For example, this is something that we worked over. In fact, over the COVID period, while we were sitting at home, we all got to put our heads together and develop the industry skills framework. I think Talent Corp today is also, and together with HRD Corp, is also trying to develop something similar for various industries. And I think it's very important for all of us in this room who represent different industry to begin to talk to the agencies. About 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I had the privilege of, as a research chair of our industry association, to develop a report, a strategy report of the global business services for the next 5 years. And one thing I learned was that as we tried to build the focus groups and to get input from people who joined this industry 20 years ago, people who are currently in the industry and some of the young ones who have just joined the industry, and also brought in the academia into the picture. We realized that once we had this conversation, the academia felt that the industry was going in one direction and therefore they needed to build a talent pool in a certain direction. And then you realize the industry is taking it in a different way altogether. So that's where I feel that the industry associations play a very important role together with the academia, together with policymakers, to define what are the skill sets that is needed, number one, and number two, to have a sort of a clear idea of where we are heading with this. Very often we all run in different ways and different paths, and we forget what is the end goal. And again, it comes back and boils down to all of us in this room to be active in industry associations, to be the voice of your own respective industry, to go back and challenge the ministries. I think MDEC and us, we have a very good relationship. We challenge each other all the time. In terms of how can we do better? How can we develop the industry skills work better? How do we build a career path for our people in the industry? So that's something very crucial. I feel that's something in many ways lacking in many industries, and it's something that really we got to work, because I think today we are in an era where the government is really spending time with the industry, talking to the industry, and having this two-way conversation with the industry. And I think that's something I think it's a very opportune time for us to take advantage of.
Okay, so what sort of HR talent management pool do you practice at Digital Tree, and can Daytree, right? And how about your clients? Have they shared any good practices in terms of talent management within the industry that you can share with us here?
So I think there are many things that we do. One of the things we spend quite a bit of time in trying to develop our people. For example, we have a program in our facility where if you want to become a manager, for example, you would have to become an RPA citizen developer certified. Right, that's a prerequisite. Regardless whether you are in any department, you have to be an RPA, robotics process automation citizens developer, which is basically almost the entry or semi-entry course. But that sort of gives you the ability to understand how bots work, because we're in an environment where we work with a lot of bots, aided bots, virtual bots, chat bots. So these are things that I think as part of development, we really need to emphasize, because this is the new way of doing work. I'm an accountant by profession. If you tell me to work, as some of us are as well, I think 20 years ago, if you took away our calculator, we would not be an accountant, right? We'll be totally lost. But 10 years from now or 5 years from now, maybe even sooner, you'll find that all of us will have a digital secretary. Each of us will have our own digital secretary. Imagine a world where we have our own personal bots. Imagine a world where we would have our own personal secretary to do all the mundane work for us. And that is going to be a reality. That is very soon. It's going to be very soon, where you just tell your secretary or your digital bot, pay my bills for this month. You don't even have to do a single click to do that. So you need to adapt. You really need to understand how these bots work. You really need to do some amount of coding or low coding to be able to work with these bots. So these are skills that we are beginning to teach our people, that to be comfortable to be working with these new tools. Each industry will have their own specific industry tools that they will be working with. And we need to get our people to be accustomed and to be comfortable with this environment.
Thanks. How about you, Rachel? Does Khazanah Research Institute, do they have any insights on what are the good HR practices, more on a micro level, in terms of developing talent within organizations?
Developing digital talent, you mean? Well, we're a very small research organization, so our HR really does not, I think, look into those sorts of things. We do have a research team that has been looking at graduate employment and really echoing everything that Raymond has just said about building problem-solving skills, building technical skills, and then on top of that, the market has to come in as well by improving the wages to make things a bit more competitive. Otherwise, we do lose a lot of our talent. So there is research at KRI, not from the HR side specifically, but on the labor market and labor market policies that need to be put into effect to really grow this economy.
Anything to add, Raja?
On the same subject? Well, we have hired data scientists to look into data and how do we analyze. I've got a couple of them in my team also, and even the IT team in MDEC has a few of them. So that's where we are going. We are definitely moving in a direction where MDEC becomes a data-driven organization. We've got to walk the talk, so that's one. But finding talent, I think my HR knows that my standards are a bit different from the HR process that we already have. For example, I have essays, I have presentation, I have open book tests for all my team members before they join my team. It's essential because we need to know whether people are all-rounded, right? Because problem solving today is complex because it can come from many directions. So it's not just one technical skill. You must have both technical and multidisciplinary skills. That's how we need to drive talent.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go back to a macro level, and I would like to talk about investments, right? So if a domestic investor or a foreign investor would like to put money, we've just heard of a presentation just now, would like to put money into the Malaysian digital economy, what would be the 3 top areas that they should be looking at?
Number one, okay, we always think that investors want incentives, tax incentives. Those days are gone, right? Yes, there are some. They want, number one, talent, infrastructure, and the ecosystem to support them. Today, investors don't come in and say, I want to do just this. They want many more things around them so that it makes sense for them to be here and serve the entire region. So I would imagine those 3 would be the top things of their head.
So infrastructure-wise, right? And that brings me to data. One of it is data governance. What would be the challenge in the future as we move forward with the digital economy in terms of data governance, having heard the nervousness that has been expressed by the audience right from the start?
I mean, right off the mark, having regulations and having them enforced is one. So that's, I think, kind of a given that, Raja already said we're working towards with revisions to the PDPA. There's an Omnibus Act that's due to come out later this year as well that I think will address a lot of, I don't actually know the content, but I've been given the impression that it will address a lot of the data governance concerns. So in terms of regulations, that's one. But I think really the big thing, and I think it was alluded to by Mr. Yong as well, is the cybersecurity concerns. Like really protecting data, protecting systems is a big deal that I think goes under discussed because it costs so much money to do. And we see, for example, just coming back to the digital health example, we've seen examples of a lot of hospitals globally that are digitalized get attacked by ransomware. And these are critical infrastructure, critical services, essential services that when they are attacked, it hurts a lot of innocent people. So cybersecurity really needs to be beefed up, both in the private sector and the public sector. And while the public sector can sort of say, okay, we are moving to do certain things, which it has to, I think there's a lot of private sector that because of the cost concerns may say, we're a small player, we don't really need to worry about this. But they're a quote-unquote small player that serves a big player in a big part of the ecosystem. So if one goes down, all go down. CrowdStrike crash was an example of that, right? All it takes is one little thing to go wrong. I mean, that wasn't cybersecurity, but it's an example of how one call can actually affect the whole ecosystem. And so cybersecurity is something that really shouldn't be kind of dismissed as, oh, well, we'll let the big players worry about that.
Okay, thanks. So coming back to you as an industry practitioner, Raymond, we've heard that talent management is one of the key infrastructure that we need to, and we've already spent quite a lot of time. But apart from that, what do you feel are the key infrastructure that is required to support the growth of the digital economy in Malaysia? And what are your clients saying as well?
Yeah, so maybe to rephrase that question a little bit, perhaps what keeps me awake at night is still the issue of cybersecurity. We deal with a lot of data for all our clients. That remains our number one priority. And, the fear of waking up to one morning, touch wood, and, and having this ransomware held literally to your head and gunpoint remains our biggest fear. Despite all the certifications that we have, we are ISO 27001 certified, PCI DSS certified, SOC 2 certified, you name it, as a center. But it's not just, as you rightly put, it's not just a worry for the big boys. It's also for all of us, the SMEs as well. Data becomes so crucial. But I think that's the reality that we all are facing today. There's a data boom. Everything is going online. All our information is going online in some way or form. Sometimes within your control, sometimes not. And that becomes our biggest fear. So I think one of the most important things that the investment should go into is in the area of protecting this data, not just cybersecurity laws, but also the enforcement that comes along with it is very, very crucial.
Okay, thanks. So on the topic of regulations, right? And we are now coming full circle where data governance is. You started your conversation by saying that we are now all very comfortable with sharing our financial data, right? And that's partly to do with regulation and how it is enforced as well, I think, by our central banks very strictly. So Raja, to you, what sort of regulatory changes are we expecting in the future to partly address this, but also other areas of the digital economy?
I think one of the hot items today is about AI. Ethical AI, safety, safer AI usage and all. So that's top of the mind in a lot of people. I think this earlier today, a lot of questions around that too. So that's being addressed. We had a good lengthy conversation on that early in the morning today. But there's also other areas like, for example, healthcare. All these regulatory and policy changes required because only then we can unlock the value of that particular industry growth. Today, a lot of things cannot be done because our policies are either one, a bit archaic, two, absent. We don't have. These are the things that we got to look into and say, okay, specifically, these changes has to happen. I think there'll be a lot of help from agencies like or research houses like KRI coming in and say, hey, we have done our research, and this seems to be the right one to push for the next 2 or 3 years.
Any insights, Rachel?
I think I've covered a lot of ground on data governance. Is there something specific that you're thinking about, or?
Yeah, actually, there's one question here which says, which inquires, how do we stop unethical collection of personal data as we access services online?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad this is on people's minds because at least it indicates that we now care about the data and the way that big platforms are harvesting. I mean, let's move beyond collecting that. They are harvesting all sorts of data and using it for their own interest. So there's a couple of ways of looking at it. What the EU, for example, has done is to try and tackle it by saying this is monopolistic practice. So it's as part of anti-competition regulations, we want to cut down on what large platforms, excessively large platforms are collecting, while still allowing small platforms to collect this information because it's still helpful for them and it's not used to the scale that large platforms do. So the EU takes a two-tiered approach towards regulating, quote-unquote, unethical data collection. So that's one way of looking at it. Another approach that, MCMC is sort of trying to introduce is trying to say we will license platforms. And that way we will make them subject to the laws and rules of our country. Whereas, before you're just, internationally offering a service here and we're going to follow wherever the laws of wherever our headquarters are. So MCMC is trying to say, well, let's try and license them here, and then they're subject to our laws. A bigger conversation about pros and cons of what that entails exactly, and the extent to which our government then has control over international platforms. But that's certainly an approach that could be taken to kind of rein in the platforms.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a last 15 minutes before we get concluding insights from the panelists. I've been going through all the online questions, but really would love to hear from audience here physically. Any questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make a reference to the statement made by distinguished panelists regarding establishment of committees of government agencies, which is the way government is doing things, and also the statement that the regulations is not effective and are archaic. So I'd like to make one recommendation on this particular topic. Because in my article on the 4IR, Shaping and Defining New Roles for the Government, I had highlighted the US Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright's observation that governments are tasked with understanding and responding to the range of 21st century challenges, but sadly, they are armed with 20th century mindset and 19th century institutions. So I think it's very vital and urgent that Malaysia must evolve and transform to what the WEF says that for the 4IR, government needs to be agile. And what does that mean? That means when you're developing policy and regulation, it's not only the committees comprising of, again, just government, but you must take in the beneficiaries, the people who are going to be adopting it and have to follow it, so that they are also co-designers. And they recommend that instead of the old model of committees, you have innovation labs and you have regulatory sandbox. So may I recommend that? One recommendation in order to help in regulatory. Secondly, of course, everybody is worried about education. And you rightly say that sometimes the syllabus is not relevant, and therefore there need to be more conversation with the industry. I come from the nuclear sector, and internationally, the nuclear industry has actually developed a career roadmap. That means for the supply chain, what do we need? For the nuclear power plant, what are the careers? So may I recommend that the innovation sectors, including digital, semiconductor, that the industry works together with the Ministry of Education to come up with this roadmap, and also to put in what is available, what is vacant, and what is not, so then the students will know what subjects they should take in order they can match industry needs. Otherwise, we keep saying, oh, we don't have students, but every year I see in the newspaper, 15,000 graduates have no job. So I think something needs to be done. Thank you.
That's a comment. Do you want to provide feedback? Any of the panelists?
Perhaps I can say yes, that's a very valid recommendation. Today you can see our Minister of Digital, YB Gobin, I think on a daily basis, he's on social media, talking to industries, associations, etc. So that shows how government has changed over the last several years. The engagement with industry and associations, I think, is so frequent today, and the amount of work that the agencies have to follow through to keep up with that pace is amazing. I can assure you that things are changing in that direction. Yeah, but thank you for the point.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the floor or comments before I move on?
Add one comment which I mentioned earlier. And we talk about industry associations. Many of us shy away from industry associations. Sometimes that's also the problem. The onus is really on all of us in this room to really play a role in being part of the industry associations, in being the voice of the industry and shouting and championing out what we want. And this is from my experience the last 4 or 5 years working with industry associations. We don't want to engage with the decision makers. We don't want to engage with the policy makers, or maybe there's not enough of us just simply doing that. And I think that's as a society, as a community, there's something that we really need to think about getting involved in our industry, our respective industry associations, telling them and communicating with policymakers and the academia what we want. And there seems to be a gap, unfortunately.
Okay, so I suppose just not relying on government to improve the situation, but also asking ourselves, what can we do in order to contribute? I noticed somebody wants.
This is in connection to a statement made by Mr. Raja. We are looking at normal talents. I mean, when you seek people for interview, you say you want an all-rounder. Okay, in your experience, you say you will want them to write essays, conduct exams for them. So, in your opinion, when you get say 20 persons for interview, what's the percentage of the number of persons you interview who actually qualify to join your organization?
Oh, very good question. Of the 20, I'll be lucky.
Say in a day you're interviewing 20
Okay,
persons,
okay.
and then you conduct an exam for them.
Yeah.
So what's the percentage from those 20 will match what's the talent you require from them?
I'll be lucky if I have one.
Wow.
I'm being very honest here. Yeah. Why I'm saying this is, on paper they look very qualified, right? When they come for the interview, I'm very surprised, even though the work is about research, but they hardly do research about the organization that they're going into. So and it's not just one or two cases, and it's many. Majority of them are in that mode today. I think I would over prepare myself for interviews. I probably use 5% of what I've already prepared, but that's not the case today. So to find the right candidate, it takes a while. That's the process that I have experienced so far, and that's also, I think, and I'm not talking about fresh grads alone. Yeah, these are also experienced people. The attitude part, it's not out there as a A or A plus. So some feel that I've already done my work and I'm entitled for this work, and I come prepared so much and I'm okay. So that surprises me. More and more I find these numbers only growing, it's not shrinking, unfortunately.
Okay, so we are actually at a level where we still haven't achieved that desired talent required for digital economy.
I can even add to that, right? One job posting will get us about maybe 150 or 180 applications. Of the 150 applications, I've seen those who are related to the skill sets and what we need is probably maybe less than 10, right? And from that 10, maybe I'll get one. Maybe. So that's how difficult it is today. Again, quantity-wise we have, it's just that the quality part we got to manage.
Just one more question, can I?
But final one, because I want to let
Sure.
somebody else have an opportunity to
Thank
speak
you.
as well. Okay, I'm going to take one more final question from the floor before. Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Rajasekaran. My name is Liana from the Global Research Network. I have a question about policy making. So a lot of the tech policy made in Malaysia is behind closed doors. I mean, yes, there are consultations with agencies and stakeholders, but most of the time the public is cast out and there isn't that level of transparency or reporting as mature in comparison to, for example, Europe. So I'm very grateful on how you shared about the e-commerce map and the process where you go through the risk management on macro competition core. So my question is MDEC thinking, or any policymaker thinking of, is it time to open up public participation in the policymaking since it's dealing with citizen data? Or have we not reached that maturity level yet? Thank you.
Maybe I can go first. I would imagine it depends on what type of policies are we talking about. I think not all policies would require entire end-to-end public consultation, like a broad society views or perspectives, because some areas are very specific to businesses, and some will touch business and society. But I agree with you. I think we need to evolve. We got to improve on some areas. We are not there 100% yet. But in the past, MOF has done polling, on public polling. They have done that for Belanjawan and others. So there are some experiences in Malaysia, but it's not very pervasive in that sense.
Anything to add to it?
Maybe I'll just chime in a little bit because, to be fair to policymakers, I think there are agencies that do public consultations. Of course, you may argue about selection bias on which are the public that are invited in. But even, I think MOF does public consultations for the budget. So they do put things on their website saying, hey, we are taking public recommendations and those sorts of things. Maybe, of course, it can be improved in terms of communications and publicity about when this is, or extending the deadline and things like that. But yeah, MOH as well, when they've introduced proposals, have a public consultation website that they list these proposals on and ask for public opinion on that. So I think there is an effort to do that. Of course, it could be improved for sure, again, in terms of communicating when it is and maybe having a bigger window. But I do think there are attempts to involve the public in these policy-making processes.
Yeah, and I would like to add also, maybe it's also for us as well to go into these sort of websites. I mean, if you're anything like me, I have a lot of complaints, but when I see that there is a public consultation, I'm like, oh, somebody else is going to do it. So maybe we need to do our part as well. So in terms of ending this conversation, I would just like to ask the organizers to put in to flash out. Yeah, because this relates to a few questions from the audience, and this is around the issue of digital divide. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
These go to the digital economic operations and also Khazanah, each one individual questions. Digital divide could lead to wealth disconfigurations. Therefore, is that Digital Economic Operation has done a study that within 15 years, this could be a variety of big numbers in terms of disparation. Okay. A second question is that we are moving to the aging society, Malaysia. Are we prepared on that digital divide, or digital gap that will take place? Thank you.
Can repeat the first question, please, once again?
In 15 years' time, it will be going to be a tsunami of digital transformations, especially on AI. Are we prepared in terms of studies done in terms of wealth distributions that will take place for a country and also individual comparison? Okay. Second, I think Khazanah understood.
We have done an analysis. There are few parts to this, right? There are various ministries and agencies are involved in when it comes to widening gap in income. There's Kementerian Luar Bandar, there's Kementerian Wanita, and so many agencies and ministries. But from a digital economy point of view, we look at we looked at salaries to start with. And we have done our analysis, we run our numbers, and we see our average salary in the tech sector, it's not that promising. So we got to push that salary to almost 2x from where we are today. Average salary, not median, average salary. Right? So that we have done. From bridging the gap, currently, I'll talk about 15 years down the road. Yeah. Currently, as part of our efforts, we have had e-Rezeki and e-Usahawan programs for the society. So we have seen people earning 10x after going through our program. For example, I can give you a few, maybe one. There's a housewife in Sungai Petani with 5 children. Yeah. And she was a very hardworking housewife. Husband is a blue-collar worker. And she used to earn about 5,000 to 7,000 ringgit a month, selling many things in the neighborhood, friends, etc., etc. She came on board our e-Usahawan program about 6, 7 years ago. It was a 3-day program for free, and a lot of hand-holding as well after the program, coaching. They learn about taking pictures, captioning, how to do Google ad, Facebook ad, etc. Her income from 5,000 to 7,000 went up to 70,000 a month. I kid you not, housewife, right? So we have seen these kind of cases on numerous occasions. We have dozens and dozens of these cases. This is how we would like to bridge the gap between the lower and the not so lower groups of income. And about 500,000 people have gone through this program over the last 6 or 7 years in about 2,000 centers in Malaysia. But in the next 15 years, I think that is a very far horizon, to be honest, because we're only talking about AI at the moment. We are not talking about quantum computing yet. Yeah? If you all know about quantum computing, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, and how it works, Skynet, Terminator can be real. So that's how things will shape, right? So that will be a different dimension or universe altogether. So we have not done 15-year view yet, but aging society, yes, we are looking into now. How would it shape the next RMK? So that we are doing work already. So those are my views.
Thank you for the question. I think aging society is a very good point to raise. There's a lot of different sectors, and Kiara is actually looking at the care economy angle on that as one angle. But with respect to the digital divide for aging society, let me talk about three points, 3 quick things. Services, scams, and socializing, because this is important for the aging society. In terms of being able to access services, public services, things like that, again, what Kiara can do is recommend policies to government. We can't control what the private sector is doing. But one of the things we have put forth, recommendation for public services digital transformation, is to make the processes simpler. So right now you have senior citizens trying to register for services at hospitals, still filing their taxes, trying to claim benefits and things like that. Even though there is a means of doing it online, it can still be a bit challenging for them because the process is relatively technical for them. So number one, simplifying their access to services. Number two, the point on scams. What we've seen from statistics in Malaysia is that seniors are at higher risk for being scammed. It's not that young people are not, but there's a lot of things that are targeted at seniors. And so again, improving digital literacy here, protections that banks are already starting to build in to make it more difficult to transfer money to unknown parties and things like that, coming down hard on mule accounts and so on, are things that are already in place. And third, on socializing, and this has to do with how we see seniors using tech. A lot of it is for communication with their friends, for staying in touch of a network. We want to encourage that because that's important for seniors to maintain that sort of network. But it does run the risk of things like misinformation and being caught in an echo chamber. So that's something that does need to be looked at. I will talk very briefly, if I may, about the research that Kiara is doing, because I'm actually putting out a paper in a couple of weeks for Senior Awareness Day on this, is we have seen the use of the internet among 60-year-olds and above in Malaysia before COVID was relatively low, right? But what the MCO did by forcing usage of digital services for vaccinations, for bills and all that, saw the usage among CTOs spike. So what that tells me is actually there's less of a digital divide for seniors than we think. They are capable of using the technologies. The problem came after COVID when we see the usage go down again, which tells me that it's not an issue of the tech not being there, it's an issue of their preferences. They don't want to use it. They'd rather go to a bank, they're comfortable that way, that sort of thing. So it speaks to what people I think have already mentioned from the audience about attitude shifts and mindset shifts of embracing technology and being willing to try new things. So hopefully we'll get there as we move towards an aging society.
Okay, thanks, Raja and Rachel. So we are running out of time. So last point from the panelists, and starting with Raymond, what is the one crucial step that Malaysia must take to lead in the global digital economy?
I think as practitioners, I think it's very important that we embrace these new technologies. I think, it's very important that, I think at this stage, again, as I mentioned about the nervousness and excitement, one of the things that I can share from experience is to begin to experiment on small projects within your organization. That's the fear, you have to get past that fear of these new technologies coming and infiltrating your workplace. The workplace is going to change in the next 3 to 5 years, maybe even sooner. If you do not begin with small experiments with your team, you will not move, and we will not be able to compete with the other countries. Already we are seeing countries like Vietnam moving so fast. We will see countries like Indonesia moving so fast. There is no reason why people would want to come to work in Malaysia then. So this mind shift has to take place very, very quickly. And the only way to do that is begin with small experiments with all these tools that's available today, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's large language models, whether it's robotics process automation, chatbots, virtual agents. These are things that must take place now, and we cannot wait. And I feel that it's very important that as a country, as a society, as we begin to embrace digital disruption, we have to embrace it openly.
Thanks. And Rachel, same question to you.
I feel like I'm going to make a kind of similar point, but the way I would convey it is to say that there is no transformation of the economy without transformation of society, right? There's no transformation of the economy without transformation of society. So it speaks to what we've been talking about in terms of improving talent, changing mindsets, really embracing the use of technology in very ordinary day-to-day things, not just about building technical skills. And so I think one way too to do that, not just at individual level, but moving up to the policy making, is to really engage with public interest technologists, right, who are familiar with the local context of what's happening in Malaysia, can understand culture and why certain kinds of technologies might not be well suited or might need to be tweaked, and are looking at it in the interest of the country.
And Raja?
Seek assistance. That's important when you want to digitize your processes, because if you don't disrupt yourself, you will be disrupted. Yeah. So that's very key.
So we've heard some very good phrases. No digital transformation of economy without transformation of society. Is that true? Right. And seek assistance. If you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else will disrupt you. So with that, I'll end this panel session. Thank you very much for putting them on a hot seat. Yeah. So.